You do not use your children as pawns to get what you want. It's so wrong and disgusting. I don't even know. Harry is just a broken man, Dan. He is broken in a big way. And I feel sorry for those children. It's bad. It's really bad because it's playing out on the world stage. Everyone's watching what you do, and you're still acting like a spoiled brat. Get over yourself.
Get over yourself, and once you've truly sat with those words, they don't let go. A broken man, that's the verdict. Not from a political enemy or a tabloid writer with an agenda, but from someone who has followed this story with real care, real insight, and a level of honesty most people are simply too afraid to deliver. And this broken man? He's been using his own children on the world stage while the entire world watches every single move. Because this is not, despite what some want you to believe, just a story about royal security, government policy, or a summer trip to Scotland. This is something far bigger. This is a story about a father, a grandfather, a king, and a silent confession sitting right at the heart of it all. A confession never spoken out loud, yet written all over every recent development for anyone paying attention. What is that confession? Simple. King Charles, Harry's father, a man fighting for his life and his legacy at the same time, would give almost anything to look his grandson Archie and granddaughter Lilibet in the eyes and say,
seeing your grandchildren should just be a natural thing. There should not be any negotiations around seeing your grandchildren. How absurd is that? And at the end of all of this, Dan, Harry is going to regret it so much because you do not use your children as pawns to get what you want. Make it about your children seeing their grandfather. Make it about them having the experience of knowing your father, the king, before, he passes on. That's what it should be about.
I am your grandfather. I am here and I love you. That's it. That's the heartbreaking truth buried underneath all the briefings, the legal back and forth, and the newspaper leaks. A grandfather who can't reach his grandchildren, and two children who barely know he exists. There's a reason this story hits differently. A reason why comment sections explode, why conversations keep circling back, why people who've followed this family for decades simply cannot look away. Because underneath all the palace politics and press games, this is painfully human grandparents, grandchildren, time slipping away, and choices that cannot be taken back. Make it about them having the experience of knowing your father, the king, before he passes on. That's what it should be about.
These children are not going to have that with their cousins, and it's all Harry and Meghan's fault. They're the reason. So they need to get a grip. It's bad. It's really bad because it's playing out on the world stage. Everyone's watching what you do, and you're still acting like a spoiled brat. Get over yourself.
To understand why this really matters, you have to go back to basics. King Charles is not a young man in peak health sitting comfortably on the throne. He is a man who has faced his own mortality with a dignity and courage that has genuinely surprised even long-time royal watchers. He's been dealing with a serious health challenge, continuing his duties with remarkable determination, adjusting quietly behind palace walls, doing it all without public complaint. And yet, through all of it, two of his grandchildren have been kept at a distance. Archie, born May 2019, Lilibet, born June 2021, the son and daughter of his younger son, Prince Harry. Two young children who, by all accounts, have had almost no real relationship with their grandfather, the king. Archie was barely a baby when the Sussexes left. Lilibet has visited the United Kingdom exactly once, and everything about those visits, what was photographed, what was arranged, what was turned into a headline, is exactly what keeps people riveted. The whisper in royal circles is that the king feels this absence deeper than he has ever been able to say publicly. Sources close to the palace say Charles has made peace with a lot: the Oprah interview, Spare, the Netflix documentaries. the endless stream of negative briefings. But the one thing he cannot make peace with is the image of those two young children growing up in Montecito, California, not knowing who he is, not knowing the country he represents.
I think she's part of that, because what you just laid out there makes complete sense. Why wouldn't it just would seem logical that he would bring the children under those circumstances? Okay, I mean, goodness knows they've got things that we don't even know about, right? So why can't you do that? And I think a part of that element has to do with Meghan and what she is putting, as an obstacle in front of Harry.
Not knowing the cousins who share their blood, that, insiders believe, is the wound that never heals. And it's against that backdrop, a grandfather's grief, a king's restraint, and a clock that keeps ticking, that everything happening right now has to be understood. Because what's been unfolding in recent weeks is not just a fight over security arrangements, it's something older and far more painful. It's a negotiation being played out in public through newspaper leaks and television appearances over the most fundamental question imaginable: whether two young children get to know their grandfather before time runs out. Think about what that actually means. Archie and Lilibet are growing up in California with a relationship to their English grandfather that is, at this point, almost completely abstract. He is a name, maybe a face on a screen, a man their parents talk about in carefully chosen words. They don't know the sound of his laugh. They don't know what it feels like to walk with him the way their own father once did. Every single week that passes without that connection is a week they can never get back. So what exactly is going on right now? Because the details matter here, and they've been buried under the noise of the broader Sussex saga.
Behind it, we have to understand, Dan, that Meghan is the one behind Harry making these demands. I think she's the one making it so complicated and difficult. And Harry is just falling into doing what Meghan tells him to do, because, he is kind of like that child that wants what he wants. So it doesn't make sense. It lets me know that Harry is just trying to be complicated.
Here's what we know. Prince Harry is due to be in the United Kingdom for the Invictus Games countdown event. Confirmed. What is not confirmed, what remains, according to multiple sources, completely unresolved, is whether he will bring Archie and Lilibet with him. And the reason it's unresolved is both simple and absolutely staggering. Harry has been publicly demanding that the British government provide taxpayer-funded security for his wife and children during any UK visit, not through private channels, not through quiet diplomatic conversations kept away from cameras, through a series of very deliberate, very calculated briefings to the American press. The New York Post published a detailed account of Harry's current position, and the language in that report is extraordinary if you read it carefully. Harry, sources stress, would love to bring Meghan and the children back to his homeland, but no firm plans have been made.
Harry is having some conversations. Something is happening that is drawing him back to, family, seeing his father before it's too late. We have to also remember that Harry had a huge regret around what happened with his mother before she passed. And I think Harry sees it happening again now with his father. And that is the urgency that he is feeling about getting back to the UK and having his children meet their grandfather. So this is also Harry trying to not repeat history.
Security is described as not yet fully resolved. There is no agreed time for Harry to meet his father. And then comes the line that stops you cold. Harry believes his father could overrule the government on this issue. Let that sink in. Harry believes his father could overrule the government on a security matter during one of the most constitutionally sensitive periods in recent royal history. And this isn't some private thought whispered to a close friend. This is a position deliberately briefed to a major American publication. The message it sends is not one of a son desperate to reconnect with his father. It's the message of a man using the press as a weapon, publicly pushing the king toward a constitutional crisis, or publicly shaming him for refusing to create one. Neither move looks good for Harry. And buried inside that same New York Post account is another revealing detail. Harry was still persona non grata at his cousin Peter Philip's recent wedding. Not invited, not included. While the rest of the extended family gathered to celebrate, Harry simply wasn't there. That quiet, unremarked absence tells you far more about where things actually stand than any briefing ever could. Now, here's where it gets really uncomfortable, because the threat, and let's call it exactly what it is, has been made plain. Harry has signaled, both to the New York Post and in previous public statements, that if he doesn't get the security guarantee he's demanding, he will come to the UK alone.
Time is something that you can never get back. And, he regretted the time when his mother passed, the time he could not get back. And once again, he is falling into a position where he is losing out, and time is going to keep going. And, it waits for no one. And it's going to be a huge regret for Harry. And I think it will cause him enormous stress and mental anguish once it is all done, because the time will be gone.
No children, no Meghan, and the implication is completely transparent. The absence of Archie and Lilibet is designed to be felt. It is meant to hurt. It is meant to make King Charles feel the full weight of what he is supposedly refusing to provide. But there is something deeply troubling about this logic, and people who have been watching closely aren't holding back. Because what Harry is doing, whether he fully grasps it or not, is using his own children as leverage, as a negotiating position, as a threat. He is effectively saying, "Give me what I want, or you will never see your grandchildren." And he is saying it in public, where the world watches, where the pressure builds, where the story keeps growing. What makes this even more striking is the contrast with how this could actually work. A private visit, a private jet, security handled within the royal estate, no photographers, no briefings, no press conferences. A grandfather meeting his grandchildren at Balmoral exactly the way Harry's own father once met him in those same hills, those same rooms, under those same wide Scottish skies. The infrastructure for this exists. The goodwill, at least on the king's side, appears to exist, and yet it is not happening. The question that sources close to the situation keep asking with growing urgency is why? Whose interests does this very public standoff actually serve?
Harry will never be able to have his children experience anything that he experienced, Harry, when he was growing up. This, I believe, is very hurtful to Harry. He is starting to see now that he is missing out, and his children are missing out, and that Meghan is controlling everything. And I feel, is feeling very regretful. He is looking at Meghan as someone that is controlling his life completely, despite how he feels.
Because if Harry genuinely wanted his children to know their grandfather, there has always been a way to make that happen. The private route has always been open. What is not on offer, what the king cannot and will not provide, is a public victory for Harry dressed up as a family reunion. And that gap between what Harry claims he wants and the very loud, very media-driven way he is pursuing it is so wide it demands a real explanation, not a spin doctor's talking point, not a sympathetic framing in an American newspaper, a real account of why the quiet route hasn't been taken. And when you search for that explanation, it leads you somewhere very specific. Because buried inside the New York Post briefing beneath all the talk of security timelines and Home Office communications is one line that tells you everything you need to know about what this is really about. Sources told the publication that Harry has not seen Prince William since the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Reports have surfaced that Harry doesn't even have his brother's phone number, and while some insist that's nonsense, the reality remains. They haven't spoken, they haven't met. Two brothers who grew up together, served together, and walked behind their mother's coffin together, now strangers for years. And the fact that William's sources confirmed he remains furious, that's not accidental. That detail is a signal.
Breaking from Meghan into really seeing what is important is what he needs to do at this point. Because you're talking about time, and that means putting aside whatever it is your wife might be telling you, whatever it is that you might want, and thinking about the time that your children are missing out with a man, and the clock is ticking. And what are you going to do when the clock stops and your father is no longer here and your children have not seen him?
Deliberate and calculated. This is where the Diana parallel becomes impossible to ignore. Those who know Harry, who have watched him across the years and understand the shape of his grief, say he carries a wound about his mother that has never properly healed, the regret about time lost, the calls not made, the visits not taken, the final years of Diana's life, which were, by some accounts, far more complicated than the mythology around her suggests. Harry knows what it means to lose someone before things are resolved. He has lived inside that knowledge for nearly 30 years, and now, according to those following these developments closely, he is beginning to see the same pattern forming with his father. The clock is ticking. It has been ticking for a while. And whatever else is driving his decisions, whatever pressures are being applied, whatever calculations are being made there is a part of Harry, insiders suggest, that is genuinely, desperately afraid of making the same mistake twice. That is what makes this so painful to watch. Because Harry is not, at his core, a foolish man. He is a conflicted one. The battle he's living inside, between the love for his father that never fully disappeared, and the choices that have made acting on that love so difficult, is written all over this situation for anyone paying close enough attention. So what does the wider world of royal commentary make of all this?
And what Harry fears is that once Charles passes on, he won't be let into Britain at all. And that is a major problem for him.
Seeing your grandchildren should just be a natural thing. There should not be any negotiations around seeing your grandchildren. You know, Harry will always keep wanting more and more if his father gives. Now, I have heard that a decision has been made. We just don't know what it is, right? So they are definitely going to, I think, I don't know, announce something maybe soon, but Harry's in a position now where he's just trying to force his father's hand.
Because it's worth stepping back from the immediate noise and listening to those who have watched the Sussex saga play out in its full complexity. What sources who follow these things closely are saying is that the king's position is actually far simpler than Harry's briefings suggest. Charles has not made this emotional. He has not made it about punishment, revenge, or long memories of old wounds. He has simply, quietly, and consistently refused to interfere in a matter of government security policy, and that refusal, those around him say, is not stubbornness, it is integrity. Because a king who overrules his government on security matters, who carves out policy exceptions for family members, is a king who has compromised the very institution he exists to protect. What strikes those who study these things most is the sheer restraint Charles has shown throughout. He has not responded publicly to the briefings. He has not authorized counter-briefings designed to humiliate Harry. He has not, as far as anyone can tell, worked through back channels to embarrass his son. He has simply held his position, and in holding it, revealed something critical.
Harry, at the end of the day, is going to be the one regretting every decision. Once again, using your children as a prop, using them, to get what you want. And, the king can't really go in this back and forth with Harry about this because he's got work to do. He's got his health to focus on. There should not be any negotiations around seeing your grandchildren. How absurd is that?
The public framing of this story that Harry wants to reconcile and the palace is blocking it is not the full picture. Because if reconciliation were truly the goal, the private route exists. It has always existed. Those who know the king well suggest he would welcome it, not a triumphant public reunion, not carefully staged photographs, not breathless headlines about breakthroughs and thaws. Simply a grandfather meeting his grandchildren quietly, privately, away from the cameras that have turned this family's pain into global entertainment. That offer, those close to Charles suggest, has never been taken off the table. What has been placed on the table repeatedly, loudly, publicly, are conditions. And conditions, in this context, are not the language of a son who wants to come home. They are the language of a negotiation. The whisper from those inside the king's circle is that Charles finds the public dimension of all this genuinely painful, not infuriating painful. Because he is a man who loves his son, who loves those 2 young grandchildren he barely knows, and who is watching helplessly as that love is leveraged against him in public, turned into a pressure point, a headline, a weapon. And what does that tell us? It tells us that the real confession, the one at the heart of all of this, has never appeared in a press release or a palace statement. It has been made in the king's silence, in his refusal to be drawn, in his patient, dignified, heartbroken restraint. That is the confession. I love my grandchildren.
When I think of all of the stories of Harry talking about, the childhood pain and suffering that he endured, his family never did anything to him like what he's done to his own children.
I want to know them, and I cannot make that happen without compromising everything else I am responsible for. That is what sits underneath all of this. And it is, frankly, devastating. But here is what those who have followed the Sussex saga from the very beginning will tell you. This is not new behavior. This is a pattern, a deeply established, entirely predictable pattern that has repeated itself again and again since Harry and Meghan left the United Kingdom. Think back across the years. Think about every major Sussex move, the Oprah interview, where private family conversations were broadcast to a global audience, the Netflix documentaries, where royal wedding footage and family photographs were packaged and monetized, Spare, where Harry laid out intimate conversations with his brother, his father, his stepmother, and the late Queen conversations that were meant to stay private turned instead into publishing history. At every turn, the private has been made public. The personal has been made commercial. The pain of others has been turned into content. And now, here again, the same pattern is running. Archie and Lilibet, 2 children who have no say in any of this, who cannot consent to being used as leverage, who are simply trying to grow up in Montecito with parents locked in permanent managed conflict, are being deployed.
Harry's children will completely be isolated with no real tight bond to that royal image that has made Harry who he still is today. Seeing Charlotte and George and all the cousins getting together and learning things about each other, having those childhood memories together. And his children will have who? Nobody.
Their absence is the threat. Their presence, if ever secured, will be the prize. Either way, they are caught in the middle of a negotiation that has nothing to do with their well-being. Those watching from a distance with real concern find this extraordinarily difficult to witness. Archie is at the exact age when childhood memories begin forming in ways that last a lifetime. The cousins he could be spending time with, George, Charlotte, Louis, are living full, grounded, connected lives from which he is entirely absent. And Lilibet is at an even more formative stage. The grandmother she was named after she never truly knew, and the grandfather, carrying the weight of a crown and a serious diagnosis, is running out of time to know her either. At its core, strip away the briefings, the legal language, the newspaper leaks, and this is a story about childhood, about the memories that get made or don't, about relationships that form or don't, about a grandfather sitting in a castle in Scotland, wondering whether 2 children in California will even remember his face. And what makes it so striking, what the people who genuinely love these children understand most clearly, is how completely unnecessary all of this is. The cousins are right there.
This is what a mature man would think and look at. And I think having that Meghan woman on your back, whatever it is that she is saying, you need to break free and you need to make some serious grown-up decisions to bring your children to see their grandfather. That is what is important, nothing else, because you will be taken care of, and you know that. So Harry's got some serious things to do, and it's a shame he's not acting on it with some urgency.
It really is.
The grandfather is right there. The country, the heritage, the family, all of it is available. All of it is waiting. The only thing standing between Archie and Lilibet and that world is a set of public conditions that serve someone else's agenda, and that is not a comfortable thing to sit with. Harry will never be able to have his children experience anything that he experienced growing up. This is very hurtful to Harry. He is starting to see now that he is missing out, and his children are missing out, and that Meghan is controlling everything. he is feeling very regretful. He is looking at Meghan as someone that is controlling his life completely, despite how he feels. And what about Harry himself? Because it would be too easy and too simplistic to just make him the villain of this story. The picture is far more complicated than that, and the people who know him best understand it. What those close to the situation suggest is that Harry is genuinely conflicted right now. That somewhere beneath the public briefings and the security demands and the New York Post statements, there is a 1-year-old man who knows, on some level, that things have gone seriously wrong, who feels in quieter moments the pull of everything he left behind, who looks at the life he's living in California, the failed deals, the shrinking circle, the brand that keeps failing to ignite, and wonders, in the small hours of the night, whether this was truly what he chose or simply what happened to him. Sources who have followed Harry's path closely suggest the Diana parallel is not lost on him. He knows what it means to wait too long. The urgency behind some of his recent moves is not purely strategic, it is emotional, it is personal, it is rooted in a grief that is decades old and still very much alive. But here is what is also undeniably true. Throughout this entire saga, Harry has consistently chosen the public performance of his position over the private reality of his relationships. He could have called his father without briefing the call to a journalist. He could have flown to Scotland quietly without making it conditional on public security commitments. Every private option has been abandoned in favor of a public one, and every public move has made private resolution harder to achieve. This, those who study the Sussex pattern say, is not accidental. Changing course would require Harry to do something he has not yet shown himself capable of, putting the public aside entirely and simply being a son. The question those closest to this situation keep asking is whether Harry is even capable of making that choice, of breaking cleanly from the logic of public leverage that has defined the Sussex operation for years, of looking at his father, his ill, aging, patient father, and deciding that a quiet visit to Scotland is worth more than a public victory. Those who love Harry believe he can get there. Those who have watched the pattern closely are far less certain. So what is actually going on behind the scenes? Those watching most carefully believe what's happening is a collision between two very different agendas. On Harry's side, the agenda is at least in part about securing something permanent. The security arrangement he's pushing for is not simply about this summer's visit. It's about establishing a precedent, a framework, a guaranteed level of protection that would apply not just now, under his father's reign, but in the future under William's. And that calculation changes everything about how his public demands should be read. On Meghan's side, and those who monitor the Sussex communications operation closely say this cannot be separated from her influence. The calculation is slightly different. Meghan, insiders believe, is deeply reluctant to return to the United Kingdom. The reception she would face, the scrutiny, the contrast between the warmth that greets other family members and the cold shoulder she has experienced before, these are not small things to someone for whom public perception is everything. So the security demand serves a dual purpose. It is simultaneously a genuine position Harry does have real security concerns and a very convenient barrier. If the bar is set high enough, it never has to be cleared. What nobody is saying on the record, but what those close to the situation have suggested more than once, is that Meghan may be the reason the private Balmoral route has never been seriously pursued. Because a private visit security handled within the estate, no photographers, no briefings, no public moment would require Meghan to either go quietly or stay home while Harry takes the children alone. And neither of those options appears to be on the table. The briefing has to be public. The negotiation has to be public. Because if it were private, it would simply happen, and it hasn't. Once you see the strategy decoded this clearly, what it reveals is genuinely breathtaking in its audacity. Two young children are being kept from their grandfather, not because security can't be arranged, not because the king is unwilling to meet them, not because the logistics are impossible, but because the conditions attached to their visit serve a purpose that has absolutely nothing to do with them. The briefing from the Sussex camp to the New York Post tells you exactly where the priorities lie. It is not a story about a father desperately wanting his children to know their grandfather. It is a story about a man who wants his security guaranteed, his position with the palace improved, his public narrative managed. The children are in the story, but they are not the point of the story. And that distinction is everything. Now, let's look specifically at the claims Harry and his team have put into the public domain, because some of them don't hold up particularly well under scrutiny. The security argument first. Harry has repeatedly said he cannot bring his family to the UK without a guarantee of taxpayer-funded armed protection, framing it as genuine, urgent concern for Meghan and the children's safety. And yet we have seen Harry travel to Ukraine, a country in active conflict, without the specific security arrangements he's demanding for a visit to Scotland. We have seen Meghan travel alone to Chicago without provisions that appear to meet this threshold. We have seen the family travel to Australia and elsewhere in conditions that didn't seem to trouble Harry at the time. None of this means the security concerns are entirely invented. Real threats do exist. But what it does suggest is that this particular demand, the public ultimatum, the newspaper briefings, the constitutional pressure on the king, is not purely about keeping his family safe. It is about leverage. It is about the permanent guarantee. It is about securing through public pressure what cannot be secured through private agreement. And then there's the matter of the briefings themselves, because Harry, who has spent years expressing outrage at media intrusion, who has sued multiple publications, who has described the press with profound personal contempt, this same Harry is simultaneously and repeatedly briefing the press about his private negotiations with his father and the Home Office. The contradiction is so stark, so brazen, it's almost impressive. Almost. Those who have watched this the longest are not surprised. The public outrage at press intrusion has always coexisted with a very deliberate use of sympathetic outlets to advance the Sussex position. The right story, to the right journalist, at the right moment. That is not a man who hates the press. That is a man who has learned to use it. And perhaps the most telling detail in the Sussex briefings is the claim that Harry believes his father could simply overrule the Home Office on this matter. This reveals either a fundamental misunderstanding or a deliberate misrepresentation of how the British constitutional monarchy actually works. The king does not overrule his government, not on security, not on policy, not on matters that are properly the domain of elected ministers. This is not the position of a man who spent years as a senior working royal. It is the position of a man who has been away long enough to have forgotten or chosen to forget what he once knew perfectly well. But step back from the tactics and look at the deeper stakes, because they are considerable. Tom Bower, who has researched the Sussex saga with forensic detail, has made a point that deserves to be heard clearly. What Harry fears at the most fundamental level is that once King Charles is no longer with us, he will not be let into Britain at all. That the brief window of relative warmth, the king's well-documented desire to reconcile, his willingness to see Harry even when others in the family are less inclined, will close permanently when William ascends the throne. And William, as those who know him understand, does not forgive easily, does not forget easily, and has made no secret of the fact that the current situation is very far from resolved. So Harry's behavior, read through this lens, is not simply reckless, it is desperate. It is the behavior of a man who knows the window is narrowing and is throwing everything at it, including, tragically, his own children, in the hope that something will finally shift. Here is the profound irony sitting right at the heart of all of this. The very tactics Harry is using, the public briefings, the newspaper ultimatums, the constitutional pressure, are the exact tactics most likely to harden the positions of the people he is trying to move. William has never responded well to public pressure. Never. The king, who has shown remarkable patience throughout all of this, has his own dignity to protect. And the government has every reason to hold its line. The deeper stakes for Archie and Lilibet are even more serious. Every month that passes without a meaningful connection to their grandfather, their cousins, their English heritage, every single month, is one they will never get back. Childhood does not wait. George, Charlotte, and Louis are building a childhood full of royal history, family warmth, and the particular magic of Balmoral in summer. Archie and Lilibet are building theirs in Montecito, largely out of sight, occasionally used as content with a relationship to their English family that is, at this point, almost theoretical. There is something quietly devastating about imagining what these two children will one day understand about this period of their lives. When they are old enough to read the headlines, to piece together what happened, to understand the choices made on their behalf, what will they make of it? Will they understand? Will they forgive? Those are not questions anyone can answer today, but they are questions Harry, at 41, should be sitting with right now. From a constitutional standpoint, King Charles has behaved impeccably throughout. He has refused to interfere in government security policy. He has not made public statements designed to shame his son. He has kept the door to private contact open, even as that door has been repeatedly used to generate briefings rather than actual reunions. Those around him describe a man of profound patience, profound sadness, and an unshakable commitment to doing what is right, even when doing what is right means watching the public narrative turn against him. What insiders have confirmed is this: a decision has been made, the king's position is settled. The days of hoping public pressure will shift Charles are firmly over. He stands on the right side of the Constitution, the right side of his responsibilities, and quietly, privately, on the right side of his love for his son and his grandchildren. The institution's broader response has been studied silence. No briefings designed to damage Harry, no counter-narratives, no palace sources telling the world what they really think. Simply silence, and in that silence, something unmistakable is being communicated. Not hostility, not indifference. A firm, quiet, unshakable refusal to be drawn into a public performance of private grief. The institution understands that every time it responds publicly to a Sussex briefing, it gives that briefing oxygen. So it has chosen to let the silence do the work and let the world draw its own conclusions about what kind of man uses his children as leverage in a newspaper story while simultaneously claiming to fight for their privacy. And the world is drawing those conclusions rapidly. So what does all of this reveal about character? Because that is what millions of people following this story actually care about most, not the legal technicalities of security arrangements, not the constitutional positioning of the Home Office. The character question: who are these people really, and what do their choices say about them? What this situation reveals about Harry is something those who knew him before find genuinely heartbreaking. The Harry who served in Afghanistan, who founded Invictus, who walked behind his grandmother's coffin with his head held high, that Harry understood what duty meant, what sacrifice looked like, what putting others ahead of yourself actually required. The Harry who is currently briefing American publications about private security negotiations while his father manages a serious illness that Harry has lost the thread of something essential, something that once defined him. What this reveals about Meghan is, those close to the situation suggest, somewhat less surprising. She has always operated with a clarity of purpose that those around her find either impressive or alarming. She knows what she wants. She knows how to arrange circumstances to pursue it. And the one thing she has consistently resisted is the private, unwitnessed, uncontrolled reunion. The one with no cameras, no narrative, no content, the one that would require her to show up simply as a human being and not a carefully constructed brand. What this reveals about Archie and Lilibet is the thing that hurts most to say. They are 7 and 5. They have zero agency in any of this. They cannot choose their grandfather. They cannot choose their cousins. They are simply growing up in Montecito while the clock ticks for everyone around them, including themselves. Because the window for building the memories that last the summers at Balmoral, the Christmases with cousins, the grandfather who tells stories about the grandmother they never knew, that window does not stay open forever either. Here is what deserves to be said plainly. Harry's own family never did to him what he is now doing to his own children. He speaks passionately about the pain of his childhood, about feeling unsupported, unprotected, left to carry a grief too large for any child to bear alone. And yet the father, shaped by that experience, is now the man keeping his own children from their grandfather, their cousins, the country, and the family that built everything about who he is. The irony is not subtle, and it is not, those who care about him say, something Harry has genuinely reckoned with. Let's zoom out because the bigger picture is critical here. What this story represents, at its largest, is the consequence of a decision made years ago that has never been properly resolved. Harry and Meghan left loudly, publicly, painfully. They built a life in California predicated on the idea that they were better off outside the royal family than inside it. That idea has been tested comprehensively by events, and the results speak for themselves. The deals meant to define their independence have fallen short. The brands meant to replace the royal connection have struggled to find solid ground. The public meant to embrace the Sussex narrative has, by and large, grown weary of it. And the family meant to be left behind keeps pulling Harry back, not through any action of their own, but through the simple gravity of blood, memory, and the quiet ache of knowing you made a choice you are no longer sure was right. What insiders believe and what recent months strongly suggest is that Harry is approaching a genuine crossroads, not just strategically, personally. He is 41 years old. His father is seriously ill. His children barely know their English family. And somewhere beneath the public positioning, there is a man beginning to feel the full weight of what walking away has actually cost him, not in deals or brand value, but in something far harder to replace: time, presence, belonging. The relationship between the Sussexes and the monarchy sits right now in a kind of suspended animation, not ended, not repaired, waiting for something to shift, for someone to make a move that isn't designed for a headline, that doesn't come preloaded with conditions, that prioritizes the human reality over the public performance. Because here is the truth that sits beneath every single layer of this story. A private visit has always been possible. Security within the royal estate has always been available. A grandfather and his grandchildren sitting together at Balmoral, away from cameras, away from briefings, away from the entire machinery of managed narrative that has never been off the table. What has been off the table is doing it quietly. And as long as doing it quietly remains unacceptable to one side of this equation, the children remain the ones who pay the price. Do you believe Harry truly understands what he is doing by turning this into a public standoff? And if he does understand it, if somewhere beneath the briefings and the legal positioning he knows exactly what is happening and why, what does that tell us about the man he has become? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the right ones. Because when you strip away every headline, every security argument, every constitutional debate, what remains is painfully simple: 2 young children, a grandfather who is running out of time, and a father who keeps choosing the public stage over the private moment that could change everything. That choice will echo long after every newspaper story about it has been forgotten. It will echo in the memories Archie and Lilibet do or do not carry into adulthood. It will echo in the relationship they do or do not have with the family and the country that is half of who they are. And it will echo, most of all, in the quiet that follows when the window finally closes and there is no more time left to open it. That is the real story. That has always been the real story, and the fact that it is being buried under security demands, press briefings, and constitutional arguments is perhaps the most telling detail of all. If this hit differently, if it made you stop and think, drop a comment below and tell us what you really believe is going on here. We read every single one, and this is a conversation worth having. If this is the kind of content that matters to you, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Because this story is far from over, and we will be right here when it moves again. See you in the next one.